Welcome in to the NFL Warren Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Stopsky. I'm recording from my living room today because I was supposed to record at like 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it's 1 o'clock in the fucking morning because today got out of fucking hand. So I'm recording out on my couch and we'll be going through, the Madden graphics. I updated as much as I could. There are some I missed. I'm recording the intro after I did the thing, so I know I missed a few. Like Zach Ertz. I missed the Zach Ertz sign. So my apologies. The free agency has been crazy. But so I missed the Zach Ertz sign to Washington. So the graphics are a little out of whack. But you'll get the idea. Instead of going and doing all 32 teams in one day and trashing all that content for one day, and also, it's because it's 1 in the fucking morning and there's no way I'm getting through 32 teams. And also like getting to bed. I decided I'm going to do 3 a day. So today we're going to do the top of the draft, Chicago, Washington, and then what would have been Carolina. So we'll put Carolina in as well. Now with the three teams we kind of start with. Like I said, we'll do 3 a day, Monday through Thursday. Tomorrow on tomorrow's pod, I'll do New England. I'll do Minnesota, and I'll do Arizona. I kind of want to go in like draft order. Now I know Minnesota picks 11, but there's a good chance they end up picking 3rd. But for today, we have WalterFootball's Charlie Campbell on to talk about the movement at the top of the draft. A lot of guys, there's a lot of questions right now. Who's going to be QB2? Who's going to be QB3? There's a lot of questions on QB3. If you follow me on TikTok, you see the amount of questions I get, or really not questions, more like hate questions of why I have JJ McCarthy as QB3. I don't, not personally, but that's what I'm hearing right now. And honestly, the reason I love Charlie so much and respect Charlie so much is because Charlie doesn't bake in his opinion about players into his reporting. He just shuts his mouth and he opens his ears. And that's really what it takes to be a draft insider. Too often you get these guys who are draft insiders / evaluators, and their evaluation process clouds their judgment of who's actually going first, right? Because it doesn't matter what I think about a player, or what Lance Zierlein or Daniel Jeremiah or Bucky Brooks think about a player. It's about what teams think about players, and that will tell you where they go. Now, I think I care about what I think about players. I think what's he's going to be in the long term, how I project him going out, but where he ends up going, I honestly have no say in. That's all. That's whichever team is picking. So. There's a lot of questions about, is it Neighbors or is it Harrison? What do the New York Giants do? How far is Olufo-Balashano going? Geez, I just butchered his name again. 1 o'clock in the morning here. Olufo-Balashano from Penn State. There seems to be a lot of change in the cornerback rankings. So that was a good conversation with Charlie. We'll play that after we do the 3 free agent teams. So before, I guess we're going to jump right into it because I want to go to bed at some point. Let's start with the Chicago Bears. All right, let's take a look at the Chicago Bears, starting on the offensive side of the ball. All right, so who do they lose, right? On the offensive side of the ball, they released Cody Whitehair. Nathan Peterman, their backup quarterback, is gone. Justin Fields is the big name they traded to Pittsburgh for a bag of donuts. Darnell Mooney goes to Atlanta, and Dan Feeney goes to Minnesota. But in return, they signed Brett Rippon, who's going to solve all the problems. Honestly, a joke. I like Eddie Rippon. I like Brett, but like he's not enough. Like I really wish they would have added a veteran quarterback for some level of insurance, to help Caleb Williams along in the process, but also just in case he's not ready to go week 1. You're not sending out a rookie who's not ready. Right now, Caleb Williams is going to have to start week 1 with his QB room. Because it's not going to be Rippon or Badgett that steps out week 1 as a starting quarterback. They bring in DeAndre Swift, pair him up with Herbert. That's going to be a really good running back duo. They gave Swift, I think, 3 years, $24 million. It's a solid group. They add Keenan Allen after, it was very apparent that LA was going to have to dump a lot of their guys. They trade for Keenan Allen, tear him with DJ Moore. all of a sudden this is a very good receiving core, although very top heavy, which is why I mocked them to get Rome Odunze at pick 9. I think Rome could slot in, be a really good immediate starter as a third option, and then take over the 2 or 1 spot when Allen is done, which, he's an older receiver. He might be on the way out anyway. So but imagine a receiving core of Allen, Moore, and Rome Odunze. Then you look at also they added Gerald Everett at tight end as a pair with Cole Kmet. Like right now, there's a really good skill group in Chicago, just missing a quarterback, which they're going to take with the first overall pick. Looking at the offensive line, though, they trade for Ryan Bates. They sign Coleman Shelton, Jake Curran. So they added 3 offensive linemen. Who's going to be the starting 5? I have Shelton right now at the starting center, but I think he'll probably end up being Ryan Bates. So I think it'll be Jones, Jenkins, Bates, Davis, and Wright, which is not a great group, but it's not a bad group either. It's a young, developing group of offensive linemen, but you have this really good receiving core behind them, allowing Caleb to get the ball out. But we also know Caleb likes to create plays out of structure. So this could be a halfway decent offense for Chicago next year. On to the defense. So the defense is a little weak, right? They lose Eddie Jackson, but that's okay. They replace him with Kevin Byard, who is, arguably better. I'm not sure he's as, honestly, they were probably at the same point in their career anyway. Justin Jones goes to Arizona. I think that's the only other major loss on defense. But man, look at that defensive line. It is really just Montez Sweat and nobody. And they didn't add anybody on the defensive line. So they're going to have to address that at day 2 of the draft. I don't know. Maybe if Dallas Turner falls past Atlanta at 8 and gets to them at 9, maybe they pass up a receiver to pair Dallas Turner with Montez Sweat. Onto the linebackers, man. They technically run a 4-3, but everyone in the NFL runs a 4-2-5 at this point because every offense runs 11 personnel on at least half of their plays. So to counter that, they run, defenses run nickel. So Edmonds and Edwards is a very good linebacker duo with Sanborn as the backup or third linebacker. For the corners, they resigned Jalen Johnson, which is great. He's a great corner. I'd love him coming out of college. Not a bad group. Stevenson and Gordon as the second and third corner. We already mentioned Byard, and then you have Brisker, and you have and you have Jake Owens, right? That Jonathan Owens from Green Bay, to really bolster that secondary. So the secondary actually looks pretty good. Honestly, it's a pretty deep secondary. We're talking about 6 guys deep on secondary. It's pretty solid. I should mention they didn't sign Jacob Martin from Indianapolis, but that's not the guy you want rolling out as your number 2. He's a number 3 at best. So overall, Chicago did a pretty good job in free agency. I think they replaced their losses pretty well. I would say, you're looking at replacing Darnell Mooney with Keenan Allen, and replacing Eddie Jackson with Kevin Byard, replacing Dan Feeney and Cody Whitehair with Shelton and Bates. Overall, and replacing Peterman with Rippon, and then what they're going to end up doing in the end is replacing Justin Fields with Caleb Williams. The Justin Jones D-tackle move is probably the only one that's they have not answered for. But overall, I would say pretty good job by Chicago. All right, on to Carolina. Obviously, no first-round pick this year. They traded him all the way for Bryce Young, who had a pretty rough season last year. So Young continues at quarterback. The running back situation of Hubbard and Sanders is okay. Sanders did not have a good year last year. Honestly, most of these guys didn't, though. Adam Thielen had a pretty solid year. If you had him in fantasy, that was pretty solid. But on this offense, what happened on this offense? They got rid of Bradley Bozeman after giving him that big contract. They got rid of Hayden Hurst. They released him. Those are their 2 real main losses on offense. Now, they trade for Deontay Johnson from Pittsburgh. They don't really add another tight end, so I guess they're going to supplement what they lost with Hurst with Johnson. As for offensive line, they spend big money on Robert Hunt from Miami, and they also signed Damian Lewis. And they also get Neiman from Green Bay, but he's not a starter. So right now, their offensive line, man, with Ekwonu, Lewis, Corbett, Hunt, and Moten, with Christensen as the sixth guy, like that's a really solid offensive line. Like you're looking at a really solid offensive line right now. Tight end is rough with I think it's just Thomas and Tremble, right? It's pretty rough, but overall, like that offensive line is pretty good. We'll see what Canales can do with this team. I think they'll be much better this year than last year. The skill guys still need some work, and we'll see. Well, the good thing for Carolina is that there's a ton of receivers in the second round. There's a lot of skill guys in the second, third, fourth round. So they'll definitely be some guys they can add to help out. On to the defense. The defense lost the biggest piece being trading Brian Burns to the New York Giants. They also lost Yetur Gross-Matos. They lost Frankie Louvu. They lost Jeremy Chin. They traded away Dante Jackson. They lost Von Bell. They lost Shaquille Griffin. So this defense is rough, right? They sign Wonham. They sign Chazon to kind of replace Burns and Gross-Matos, but like that's a big downgrade. They do sign A'Shawn Robinson with the New York Giants, who had a pretty decent year there. The defensive line, though, like outside of Derek Brown, is pretty average. And then you look at the linebackers. They signed Josie Jewell from Denver to pair with Shaq Thompson. Again, they're going to run a 4-2-5 like everybody else, or a nickel. That's an okay linebacking core. It's not bad. The front six is all right, and then the back five, J.C. Horn's great, and then you got Hill and Jackson. They sign Dane Jackson from Buffalo, so they get rid of Dante Jackson. They add Jane Jackson. They're solid. They add Jordan Fuller from the Rams, and Woods is already there. So it's not a super deep secondary. Honestly, this defense is pretty rough. It's not a bad defense, but it's really Derek Brown and some pieces, right? I do like J.C. Horn, and I like Shaq Thompson, and like Jordan Fuller is pretty solid, and I really do like A'Shawn Robinson. So it's not terrible defense, but I still think Carolina is a full offseason away from being like real contenders for anything. All right, on to Washington. So they released Charles Leno. They released Logan Thomas. They lose Jacoby Brissett to New England. Same thing with Antonio Gibson. City Charles is gone. They released Nick Gates. Sam Howell was traded to Seattle. Curtis Samuels lost to Buffalo. So they lose a ton of pieces from an already pretty weak offense. They signed Marcus Mariota, who's going to, I guess right now, would be QB1. Now, the assumption is they're going to draft Jaden Daniels from LSU, or maybe Drake May or JJ McCarthy. But I think right now, after talking with Charlie Campbell, it seems like Jaden Daniels is the solid QB2. Looking at the running back situation, they signed Austin Eckler, and they already had Robinson there. So now the group of running backs is pretty solid. And then over at receiver, nothing's really changed, right? They have Dotson, they have McLaurin. I don't think they added anybody. Not that they had anybody of note there for receiver. Still a little light, right? They have Jason Crowder there. They have Brown. So it's not a terrible receiving core. It's pretty solid. We'll see if Dotson takes the next step. Terry McLaurin is always pretty damn good. For tight end, they have. Oh, that's right. He's not even on this list, but he should be there. Is Zach Ertz? Zach Ertz is on the Commanders. That's a mistake on my part on the graphic. Zach Ertz is and will be the starting tight end for the Commanders. Over to the offensive line. So they lost Leno, lost Gates, lost Charles. They bring in Tyler Biadasz from Dallas. They bring in Allegretti from Kansas City to try to bolster up that line. Add it with Cosme, but like this line is pretty bad, right? And Wiley's there from last year, so this is not a great. Obviously, the way I think it will end up stacking out. Honestly, I don't know who's going to play left tackle right now. The graphic for Madden's a little fucked. It'll be some combination of Biadasz, Cosme, Allegretti, Wiley, and then someone to play the other tackle spot. But it's a weak group, so I could see Washington. Who do I have in the draft? Who did I have for this? In the mock draft? I'm gonna look it up right now. I've forgotten. It's been a couple days. I had Washington. Wow, that was a lot of Long Island and what I just said. Right, Washington, Jane Daniels. So we didn't get into the second round. But looking at the draft so far, all the good tackles might be gone by the time we get to the second round. So this is going to be a little rough for Washington and offensive line. Jaden Daniels, who already has a pretty bad pressure to sack ratio, might have a rough go in 2024. On to the defense. Who they lose in the defense? They lost Cameron Curl, Cody Barton, Casey Toohill. That defensive line is not. The interior is great with Allen and Payne. On the edge, they have some solid pieces, right? Cleveland Farrell, Dante Fowler, Armstrong, who I think they had all those this year. Like that's a pretty solid group that they put together. It's deep, but it's not. There really isn't any star power on the edge compared to what they used to have in Sweat and Chase Young. So now we go to the linebacker group. Linebacker group, now again, they'll probably run two linebackers. Wagner and Luvu is good, but there really isn't a good third linebacker, which you kind of need in the NFL. At least be a solid third linebacker. Anthony Pittman maybe, but like it's not great. Onto the secondary. Did they add anyone in the secondary? They did, but it's not on this list right now. They did add Noah Igbenogany from Dallas, but he's not really a starting corner. St. Juste, Forbes, I guess he would be the third corner. It's a kind of weak corner trio though. And then for the safeties, Jeremy Chin would end up being the starter. This Madden graphic is all out of whack. My apologies. Martin would end up being Martin would probably end up being like the next guy, that third, that nickel like strong suit type guy, and Forrest as the free safety. But overall, this defense is pretty rough. We're going to see what Dan Quinn can do with this squad, but this looks like it's going to be a rough go for the Washington Commanders in 2024 honestly on both sides of the ball. They have a lot of building to do. Jaden Daniels is going to be under constant duress. Washington is not looking hot in year one. We'll see what Cliff Kingsbury can do with this offense too. This is going to be a hard one. It's going to be a hard one for Washington. We'll see how it goes. All right, so you might notice that I am in different clothing and look disheveled, and there's Miss Rachel on the background. It's because I forgot to record a fucking intro for Charlie Campbell last night. So without any further ado, before my daughter starts screaming, Walter Football Zone and my good friend, Charlie Campbell. All right, I'm joined by my good friends, possibly the greatest NFL draft insider to ever exist, Walter Football Zone, Charlie Campbell. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. How you doing, Matt?
Good, man. We're almost a month and a half away from the draft. Finally, it's starting to come up on us. Now that free agency is kind of done. The first two waves came on fast last week, where it seems like, I don't know, you've been in the league for a while now. Was the first day of tampering seem like the fastest day of free agency in like recent years?
Yeah, I mean, closest to the combine, it seems like they try and kind of keep things moving along in the off season to keep the NFL in the limelight of the media world. So they like to have combine not too long after Super Bowl and then free agency shortly thereafter, and then you get all the draft, extra draft coverage as it gets closer in April, and then the draft. So they're keeping it pretty jam packed.
Yeah, it's very tight, the schedule this year, and I feel like when I used to read your stuff back when I was early before I met you, I felt like there'd be multiple mock drafts where you'd be projecting free agent moves. This year, you released a mock on Monday, and then the following Monday, free agency was done. You're like, this is all the big moves have been made. It seems like every big move that was going to be made is done already. So it's a little bit easier to project mocks going forward. Now we're finally in that stage now where we're starting to see like real consensus picks. And so the main one that I've been seeing is Dallas Turner to Atlanta. Is that something I know you mocked in your last draft, but it seems like now that's a pretty popular opinion that Dallas Turner is going to end up as the first edge defender to Atlanta.
Yeah, and I think right now that's a safe assumption, but things can change in April because coaches get involved in the draft process. So, it's not a done deal at all. A lot of NFL coaches they get through the end of the season, they get some time with families, their coaching changes going on, so they're interviewing other coaches for the staff. They're doing reviews and grades on their own players. Then they start to get more into free agency and watching free agents and getting familiar with draft guys. But then come April, you have the actual coaches involved in the draft meetings with the scouts. And so that can always shake things up. You have the pre-draft visits. Coaches can kill players that scouts like, and sometimes the coaches will be 100% on board with how the scouts view it. So right now, I think that pick makes a lot of sense because Atlanta definitely could use another edge rusher. But I don't think it's a done deal, and I'm kind of I don't have any sourced information on this, but in the back of my mind, I'm kind of questioning maybe Quinyon Mitchell there as well to Atlanta. So that's one that's just kind of I'm going to dig into as we get closer and try and get an idea. But it's just one that's got a kind of idea that's in my head at the moment.
Well, it seems like the cornerback ranking has been all over the place from the start of the season to now, right? It went from Kool-Aid McKinstry to then Terrion Arnold to now Mitchell. Do you feel like Mitchell's going to be the first corner off the board?
I think so. And, I think that's also part of the failings of the general media, but also it's not necessarily just a failing, but, they're jumping ahead with projections before teams have even area scouts have done their reports and grades on players. Cause we're watching college football on Saturday, and it's something that people like to point out and discuss. So, I think that at the end of the season, and at around Senior Bowl time, Terrion Arnold was probably the consensus corner to be the first one drafted. And then I think with the way Mitchell performed at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine, he's gone up with Arnold running slower. He's not a super quick twitch guy. And Mitchell showing size and speed, and really excellent week at Senior Bowl against better competition than what he was typically seeing at Toledo. And then, of course, he has multiple seasons of good tape and production. So I think just through the process, he's aced it so far and checked all the boxes. And now he's the favorite to be the first corner drafted.
So this is why I love the work that you do, right? Because you're one of the few people that does this that doesn't kind of bake in their own opinion, right? You have your own opinion on these players, but a lot of these other draft experts or draft insiders, they bake in their own opinion, and I think it skews the view of what's actually going to happen, right? And we're going to talk about that a lot in the QBs, but I think you see a lot of these mainstream media guys who talk about the draft, And of course, they're drawn to the Alabama corners, not the Toledo corner. And you're over here just listening, right? That's the biggest thing. And I get a lot of pushback when I mock certain things. I'm like, doesn't matter what I think, right?
Exactly.
I'm not pulling the trigger on this
Right.
player. It's the team. And
Right.
even if 31 teams hate this player, if the team that's drafting likes him, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
That's what's going to happen. And that kind of goes into the QBs here, right? Caleb Williams is a pretty much consensus 1-1 at this point. Now that Fields is gone. And then you fall into this Jaden Daniels, Drake May, JJ McCarthy situation. And it seems like Jaden Daniels kind of edged out the other two as being the consensus number 2 to Washington. And then it's that Drake May McCarthy fight. And I think Lance Zierlein tweeted out yesterday that there's like a huge disparity between the media and the fans and the teams when it comes to someone like JJ McCarthy. And this is reminding me a lot of the Trey Lance situation in 2021, where fans were like, "Oh, it's Justin Fields, it's Mac Jones, it's definitely not Trey Lance." And then come draft, Trey Lance is QB3. Are you seeing the same kind of deal with McCarthy and teams versus fans?
Well, I don't have a good answer for that yet because from lately I haven't heard any kind of real flipping in terms of teams saying that they like McCarthy more than May. I haven't heard that yet from teams, but Lance Zierlein does talk with team people, so maybe he's talked with some teams that feel that way. I haven't heard that yet from them, but I think with both of them being kind of viewed as consensus first rounders, they're not going to last long. It's going to be a question of if New England follows through and takes one at 3, and then Arizona trades out at 4, or the Chargers trade out at 5 for McCarthy and May to end up going in the top 5. There's just so many teams that need a quarterback, are within striking distance between Minnesota, Denver, Las Vegas, that I would be really surprised if either of those two made it out of the top 5. And really, I think they're probably going to go 4 in a row. I think most likely you'll have May and McCarthy go 3 and 4. And I think it'll be that order, but it's not impossible that maybe the team that likes, prefers McCarthy over May. That's definitely feasible.
Yeah. And I have we seen a 1 through 4 QB run? I don't think
I can't think of one.
Right. So here's what I've been hearing about Arizona. From what I've heard, they're really in no rush to trade out. They want Marvin Harrison, from at least what I've heard in Indy, which makes sense, right? Like that seems like it's gonna be one of those things where, because some team's gonna love May, some teams gonna love McCarthy. One's gonna be available at 4. Do the Cardinals pull a Dave Gettleman, not pick up the phone and just like, we're taking our guy, that's it, we're taking Harrison, and not listen to offers? Or do they actually pick up the phone? Because they might get a decent haul, right? But I guess it really comes down to, how far they want to fall back, right? Because right now we're looking at Denver or Minnesota. Both those teams kind of put you in like weird spots, right? In terms of the receiver tiers. It's kind of seen right now as Harrison, Neighbors, and then like kind of Roma Dunze, and then all the way like a big gap, and then Brian Thomas, right? That like early 10s, 11, 12s put you like right between those two tiers. And I wonder if that's stopping Arizona from moving back any further than like 6.
Yeah, I mean, obviously if they move back much at all, they're not going to get Marvin Harrison, because the Chargers at 5 and the Giants at 6 could easily take him, and they will take him. So one of those two. If they, like, say the Chargers preferred Neighbors, Harrison wouldn't get past the Giants, or vice versa. So they really can't move down and still land him. The decision they have to make is if they love him enough to pass on future first-round picks or another first-round pick this year. So if they're trading with, say, Minnesota, you can get the pick that Minnesota just acquired at 23, which is why I think they did that deal. And then
Absolutely.
And then, or if it's a team like Denver, do you like Marvin Harrison enough to turn down potentially Denver's first round pick in the next 2 drafts? And that's a tough one to turn down, in my opinion, even with either team, because while Harrison is an excellent receiver prospect, we've seen plenty of good receivers get drafted late in the first round and in the second round and day 2. There's just a long list of good receivers to be had later. So I think when push comes to shove, it's going to be really tough to turn down multiple first round picks and still come away with good receivers, but they can build up their front 7 on defense. They could add multiple receivers to give Kyler Murray, a few guys that can give him mismatch advantages. So I definitely think when push comes to shove, they could definitely end up moving down.
And I love your point about the receivers. And I think so much about receivers and all players in general, it really comes down to where they land, right? If you're taken high, and because you see this a lot with receivers taken high and not working out that well, it's because they're getting thrown to by like these scrub quarterbacks and usually bad franchises. But you get a receiver because all these players drafted in the top 50 have decent levels of skill, right? They're all pretty good athletes. You put one with an all-pro quarterback and one with a guy that's not going to make it past year 2. Even if the guy that's with the all-pro quarterback isn't as good, he'll produce more. And we're in a production business. It's all really matters.
Yeah, and I would also add, in terms of Harrison, while he is graded high as, if a team, for teams that use the colors there, like a blue elite player, he definitely got those grades. He also didn't grade out as high as Calvin Johnson or Andre Johnson. So while he's viewed as a legit first round top 10 player, he's not viewed at that level of prospect. So you could move back, and from a skill set perspective, there isn't a huge difference between him and Brian Thomas Jr. in terms of size, speed. There's not a big difference between them. But Marvin Harrison's much more polished player and a better route runner, better wide receiver than Brian Thomas is. But in terms of sheer size and speed, to your point, Matt, there's good ones that are going to be had at the end of the first round. A.D. Mitchell is big and can run well. Xavier Leggett has size and has speed. So there's going to be other good receivers on round 2 that are just really good football players like Ricky Pearsall or Ladd McConkey. So, there's guys that, we've seen, whether it's Cooper Kupp or Amon-Ra St. Brown, who are 3rd, 4th round picks, can turn into number 1s in the NFL. So it's hard to pass up on future first round picks, especially in a loaded receiver draft when you can come away with a good receiver or 2 good receivers with your picks in the 20s, because they have picked 27 already. Then they got plenty. They have ammo on day 2, so they're in a great spot to load up that roster, and they could make it even better.
Yeah, and I think with talk about trading out future picks, I think this also has to talk about the Patriots, right? Because the Patriots being rumored as a team that's been in contact with the Vikings. I know that right now they're projected to have Drake May. I know you don't project trades in your mocks. But the Patriots are not a quarterback away from winning the division. Like, they're not even close to a Super Bowl. They're definitely not even a quarterback away from winning the division. Like, they're in a stacked division. Do you think there's a chance that the Patriots move back with Minnesota? They take 11-23, shore up both sides of the offensive line, and build up more players, because their roster last year was horrible. Like, it was a bottom 5 roster. Throwing Drake May into that mix, they didn't really add anybody on the offense to really make it a better offense, right? They just re-signed Wendu, which is great, but there's really no one else added. You throw Drake May into that, and it's Mac Jones all over again.
Yeah, I think think it all comes down to their feelings on Drake May and JJ McCarthy. If they're not in love with those guys, then I think, they move back or stick and pick and go with something else is probably what will happen. If they're not in love with them, then I don't think they would force it. So I think that's really kind of determines whether they're open to trading back or not, is just if they how they feel about those two, because they know in all likelihood Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are gone, and now they have to decide whether they feel like May or McCarthy can be their franchise quarterback. And if they don't love them, then move back and get picks to help build up that roster and go for a quarterback in hopefully next year. But the risky part about that is you never know what's going to be coming in the future. You don't know. Next year could be a draft like a couple years ago where Kenny Pickett's the only one who goes in the first round, and a lot of teams just don't feel there's one there. And then you're building up the rest of the team, and you can get stuck in that quarterback purgatory where kind of like Atlanta has, where they're always just outside of it. So, they've built up talent on the team, but that position continues to hold them back. So they go and get Kirk Cousins. But that's kind of the danger of passing on these guys. You don't know when you'll be in position to get a first-round quarterback again. You don't know how the future drafts are going to produce quarterbacks for you or not. Maybe they will, but you can't bank on it. This is no way to know. So there's definitely some risk in that strategy. If you feel like May or McCarthy can be a good starter, then it's hard to pass them up. But if you don't love them, you don't believe that, then you do.
Right. It also, I think, comes down to their how close they view Bo Nix to that group as well, right? Because you can trade back to 11 and probably still get Bo Nix at 11 or even 23.
Sure, yeah.
So
right.
I think that's also how they have to view it. I know some teams do view Nix and McCarthy in kind of like the same tier. And if that's the case, then you can get them and move back.
Right.
With the Chargers, originally I thought they were a great trade back option, right, at 5. But now that they're about to walk into the beginning of the Harbaugh era with Quentin Johnston as receiver 1, do you think they can pass up a Malik Neighbors, or are they just going to roll out there with a pretty suboptimal receiving core for Justin Herbert?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it all depends on how things go here. I mean, if say New England sticks at 3 and then takes Marvin Harrison or Neighbors, and then Arizona trades out, then I don't think the Chargers will have, well, I mean, they'll have the opportunity to trade down probably if one of those 4 quarterbacks gets to 5. So in that case, I think they do. I think they should trade down because this is a good receiver draft. They can get other quality receivers later, and they just have a lot of other needs on that roster. They need help in the secondary. Joey Bosa's been injured a lot. Khalil Mack is over 30. They're both very expensive. You got them for next year, but you're going to need more talent on the inside of that defensive line and linebacker. There are just a lot of holes on the roster. So getting more picks, I think, would definitely appeal to Joe Ortiz. But at the same time, they definitely do need a number 1. So if you don't have a good offer there, then I think you stick and pick and you get Justin Herbert at number 1 with Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison.
Last team question for you. The Denver Broncos have kind of put themselves in a position where they're kind of fucked, right? They don't have a real quarterback on the roster. It's Jarrett Stidham, if I'm mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's the only reliable, I guess in air quotes, right, quarterback that can start day 1. So they have to take a quarterback, and they're really outside of it, right? With Minnesota making that move, Minnesota has way more ammunition to get a quarterback now than Denver does. If Denver wants to move up, let's say with Arizona, and Arizona knows that they kind of have Denver over a barrel here, what is Denver going to have to give up to get this pick? Because they're going to have to overpay, right? They know they're fucked.
Yeah, I would think they have to go from 12 to 4. You're probably looking at like 2 first-round picks. That's probably. I mean, that's very close to what San Francisco gave up numbers-wise with Trey Lance. I think they were about at 12 or 13, and they went to 3. So it's roughly the same. So you're looking at 2 first-round picks in order to probably get that deal done. So it's very, like you said, they're in a really difficult position because it just shows how painful the Russell Wilson trade is. Not only did he not work out for them, but giving up 2 first-round picks for him. And so then if you do that deal and you give up 2 first-round picks, now you're looking at a 5-year span of only 1 first-round pick being added to your roster, which is, that some teams, the Rams pulled it off. They went a long time without one and managed to win a Super Bowl. But I don't think that's something that can be easily duplicated. So they drafted well on day 2 and added a lot of key free agents and big time players to make that happen. So I definitely think Denver's in a really difficult position here. And like you said, I think for them, they have to really love JJ McCarthy or Drake May in order to do that deal, because they're to put themselves in that position without first round picks for the next 2 years, having just gone through that. That's really difficult to sustain talent on your roster. So they're going to have to be very passionate and have strong belief in this quarterback.
Yeah, and with LA, I think that's a situation that really that was a perfect situation for them, right? That they already had the bones of a good team, and they made some great moves and some very aggressive moves. But those were moves you probably don't make very often and come out as a winner. For players that have starting to slip down in the draft, Olu Fashanu from Penn State was once rumored to be like a top 6-7 pick. He's at 14, your latest mock, and I see him now being like kind of jockeying for position with JC Latham, right? Originally it was like JC, Olu, and Alt as like who's going to be OT1. Now it seems like Joe Alt is squarely OT1. Why do you think Fashanu is falling down? Is it because of the run of quarterbacks and receivers at the top, or is there some concerns that we should be worried about?
I think it was just the media getting ahead of themselves. Teams never viewed him that high. I wrote about it in the fall after speaking with a handful of teams and where they were grading him. They viewed him as a solid first rounder, kind of like a Russell Okung type left tackle, but not a Penny Sewell type tackle, like legit top 10 skill set and dominance on the field. So I think just the media got a little ahead of themselves. And I think that also kind of got hyped up a year ago when he decided to go back to school. And some media thought this was, shocking because he could have gone high or that kind of thing. But I think they just kind of missed the boat a little bit in projecting him too high. But really, he's kind of right where teams have had him since the area scouts did their reports and grades in the fall. So I think that range from 10 to 20 is pretty appropriate for him. And I don't think he'll slide too far in the teens because there's a lot of teams that could use tackle help. He could play on the left or right side, whereas Latham is viewed as more of a, sure right tackle. Same thing with Fuaga from Oregon State, more of a right tackle only player, where Fashanu has left tackle capability. So I don't think he'll slide too far, but I think he's going to probably go in that 11 to 16 range.
Last question for you. In terms of risers that we've seen now from either situational risers where teams now we see teams needs going to April, and also performance risers from pro days and combines, outside of Xavier Worthy, who obviously broke the 40 record, that was always going to make him rise up. Are there any other players that you're hearing more about now post combine than you were, let's say, in January?
Yeah, well, I would say Jackson Powers Johnson, the Oregon center. I knew a bunch of teams that had graded him in the second round, but liked him. But now, after free agency, when all these guards have gotten some huge contracts, and there's a number of teams picking in the 20s that lost some of those guards and have holes on the inside of their offensive line, I think he's a lock to go in the 20s at the lowest. I don't think I think an outside chance he cracks the top 20, but most likely he's going to go between 21 and 29. He's been a riser. Aside from him, we hit on Quinion Mitchell, who's definitely been a riser through the process. I think there's A.D. Mitchell has helped himself in this part of the year. The one thing with him, I know some teams are a little concerned about how he manages his diabetes. So that's something that I think he needs to kind of address and help himself with when he goes on team visits and does team interviews leading up to the draft. Just kind of indicate to teams he has a good plan on how he's going to make sure he's managing his blood sugar and able to do everything that he needs to do in terms of gameplay and practice and working out. Like Mark Andrews has done a great job with the Ravens. It can be done, but it's Jay Cutler did it as well, but it's not something that just comes easy. You have to be on top of it. So he's been a riser as well. And then I think Tyler Guyton has helped himself. I knew teams that had maturity concerns, but he interviewed well at the combine. So that's kind of helped ease those concerns about him. And obviously he's big and athletic and plays a premium position. So I think he's been a riser as well, where he could go top 20.
Interesting. So with, and I'm happy you kind of touched on like some of those like off the field things, because that does, it's away from fans and like the general media. So when these guys go later and people are like, oh, how? And you always do this great write-ups at the end of the draft, like why so-and-so fell in the draft. And you really go into these details over at WalterFootball. And I think that's really important.
After the draft, teams can speak a little more freely about some of this stuff. So then I can circle back with them and just kind of get an idea as to why they passed or why a guy slid, and they can give me a little bit more of the nitty gritty. Whereas right now, they even with me, someone that they trust, they still have to kind of watch what they say sometimes. So it's definitely interesting to hear after the process why certain guys slid and why certain guys went undrafted.
When you talk about you being someone who's trusted, I always love telling this story, and I'll let you go in a second. I've held you way too long. I won't name the person who it was, but when we were first hanging out together in Indianapolis, I'm going to meet you at Prime, and I walk up to you, and I thought you were talking to a writer because this dude looked like a substitute teacher, and I introduced myself. I'm like, hey, I'm Matt. How you doing? And this guy gives me like this death stare, and I'm like, odd. And you're like, let's go to the bar. I'll see you in a second. I'm like, yeah, sure. I go to the bar, getting a drink for both of us, and you walk like, oh, sorry, I was talking to so-and-so general manager. And I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to walk into your info grabbing meeting with so-and-so general manager. But I've even before I knew you, I knew how really tied in you were to the league. After getting to know you, there really isn't any question about how good you are at your job. And as for Jackson Powers Johnson, that's someone that I saw being mocked very late. Coming in January, but now it seems like Oregon, Pittsburgh, or teams, not Oregon, Seattle, Pittsburgh, or teams like could really use some interior help. So I do agree, like possibly into the 20s, but definitely like in the early 20s now for him. But Charlie, where can the fans find your work?
I write at WalterFootball.com. Tons of draft content there every day going up, and you can follow me on Twitter at Draft Campbell.
Charlie, thank you so much, man. You're the best.
Thanks, brother. Great talking with you.
All right.
And we are done for the day. We'll be back tomorrow talking about, again, the New England Patriots, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Arizona Cardinals. Also, Matt Giattino will be back with me talking about the offensive linemen in this draft. Again, no Friday recording because there wasn't people that listened on Friday. And I just think that's, 4 days is enough. You really want to hear me for fucking 5 straight days? Come on. So Thursday will be the last pod of the week. We'll also do our schmuck and mensch of the week on Thursday. So I will see you all tomorrow. Check out me on TikTok, on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever you, or Spotify or Apple, whichever way you're listening right now. Also check out the other thousands of places I'm at. It really, if you're listening this far, you're either on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. So if you are, thank you. If you're listening to the audio only, there is a video version of my cute face. If you're on YouTube, there is an audio version if you're tired of looking at my ugly face. And if you're interested in short form format or in people yelling at me about opinions about JJ McCarthy, TikTok is available until Congress bans it. But anyway, I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night. I am going to pass the fuck out.